This is my take on my Halloween fence. I'm doing 2 rings and 1/2 inch PVC pipe in between each one. And as you can see here, I measured them out so I know where to make my marks. Here I'm using a 7/8 spade bit, using a center to mark my holes between the 2 rings. This way I'll be able to drill them out in the right location. I've done the 2 rings instead of the single like most people do, just to try to save money. It saved me like $25 per fence. So to me, for no more than I use it, this was $25 was a big savings when I already have 7 of them done already. So basically that's about it on that part there, is just measuring them out. And as you can see here, I'm using my saw to cut my 4-inch PVC pipe from my rings. These are marked off at 1-inch marks. So I go through and just mark 10, 12, 15, ever how many I can get, and then I'll come back in here and then I'll use the saw to cut them. And be super careful when you're using a saw and stuff. As you know, it's all dangerous. There ain't a whole lot of holds it in place here. As I go to cut it, you'll see I just keep cutting the inches off one at a time. And this is a 12-inch miter saw, so you don't have to spin it around and cut it. That makes a big difference. I can just do a chop saw like type, just come down and cut it one at a time. And like I said, these are 4-inch. They are a little thicker than your normal, but it's just 1 inch is all I end up doing. So you could do 3/4, you could do 1.5 inches. I mean, it's whatever you want to do. I mean, I use 1x2 boards, so I guess you could do up to 2 inches if you wanted to, but I wanted mine to sink in a little more. And by the way, I don't have safety glasses on, so you might want to use safety glasses. And as you do cut this, the plastic does get really hot. And then we'll go on here in a minute. I used 8-foot 1x2s. I didn't use the treated. I just used the regular pine. I figured once I painted them with exterior painting, I mean, I don't feel like it's going to be that big a deal. But I done the 1x2s on my drill press and just made a little jig for it, slide them across. That's what you can see here. I already made one jig, so all I'm doing is, this process is probably slower than most people do, but I just done my hose and just lined them up from the top one there, and then there's one right below it, so that way every one of them matched up. So I'll just make my drill my hole, and then I'll just slide it down and just keep doing that until all of them are done. And like I said, I'm pretty sure there's probably a faster way, but this was just the way I done it. I probably couldn't do any more than 2 at a time. I've heard some people doing 3, but I got a Harbor Freight drill press. Yeah, I don't think it has enough power to do that. But I'll just continue to keep sliding down and just continue to keep drilling holes over and over and over and over. You'll need 3 of these per fence, 1 at the bottom, 2 at the top. And this is a Forstner bit is what I have on here. I did do the spade. I didn't see really a big difference in the two, but I just used that Forstner bit. It's I don't remember what that one was called. It's 7/8 is what a spade bit uses. Even though it's 1/2 inch PVC pipe, it's still 7/8 drill bit. And as you can see here, this is where I start putting them together. These larger ones are 56 and then 50, so there's 6-inch difference between the two. So I'm just sliding them through the top, and then I'll connect the bottom 1x2 to the end on the bottom side here, and then I'll just keep sliding these in until they're all in. And then my 1x2s is an 8 feet. I just cut them off wherever the one single one is on each end, and I cut them off. It's like I don't know. I have to go about and look. There's about 4 or 5 inches you cut off on the end of it. That way they all end up with single, and then when you go to connect them, there'll always be 2 rings at each one, in between each one. And I kind of done my design off Holly 100s. They've done the two instead of 1 ring PVC pipe. And then here you can see I'm just sliding these down. And when I slide these down, and eventually I'll get like 3 inches from the end. And then I made I just took a 2x4, drilled down in the center of it, and I think it was like 3 1/4. So and what I'll do is I'll just slide that little jig up. You'll see that here in a minute, but I just slide it up in there, and then it's 3 1/4. So then I know it's 3 1/4 all the way across. And then just once you do, a couple of these, it starts getting faster and faster as you do it. And you can make that bottom any height you want. It could be at 2 inches, 1 inches, 4 inches, whatever you want. Here's the jig. It's 3 1/4 is how deep that hole is inside there. And it wasn't any science behind it. I just drilled it out. That's just what it ended up being. So as you can see right here, I just push it up in there, and then it's 3 1/4. And then I'll drill this out. And then what I end up doing is I'll put a 1 1/4 drywall screw in it. I buy a whole bag of them at Ace Hardware for hardly nothing. Like 3 pounds was like $5 or something like that. But I'll just continue on down the process here and shove it back up in there, and that's my 3 1/4 again. Drill it out and just continue to put screws in all the way across the whole bottom. And you definitely want to drill them out. If you don't drill them out, it end up breaking the board, splitting it, and everything else. But I did originally do 1 1/4, or 1 inch, and I went with a 1 1/4. It almost gets out the backside. And it goes so much faster if you make that little jig. Now I didn't make a jig for the top, which I should have done, but I just went around measuring the top and done it that way. But I'll show you that here in a second. But anyway, you just continue to keep drilling, screwing. And like I said, I bought the whole bag of those screws for like 3 pounds for $5. I thought it was way cheaper than going to Home Depot and buying a bunch. And they're already black, and they're just cheap, like I said, cheap drywall screws, all they are. Now we'll go ahead and move to the top. And as you can see here, I've already done the top. And then what I've done was put these little spacers in there. So what happens is my rings don't that way they're not all the way on one side. By putting that in there, that allows them to stick up just a hair bit on each side, so it evens them out. And there's nothing specific about which one of those I use. I had them laying around. It's just what I used. This is probably out of order here, but and still, like I said, what I done, I'll go and just tell you how I done all this. From the top, the longest one is I just measure down 10 inches from the top. The short one is 6 inches from the top, and then I just made my marks. And then what I done was then screwed the whole top one in at those marks, so that way every one of them is the same. So it's the long one's 10 inches down, and the short one was 6 inches. Just make your mark, put your board on there, drill your hose again, and just screw them in like I was doing here. And then on the bottom, and like I said, once you pull them together, then you put your screws in there again. I'm still using 1 1/4 all the way through the whole process, other than when I go to screw the rings in from the bottom. Those are 1 inch. But like I said, once you get going, it actually starts going faster and faster once you get a rhythm down on how you want to do it. But like I said, I done the 2 rings, and then a PVC pipe. And like I said, it saved me probably like $25 per fence by doing it that way. If I'd went the other way, it would have been, I would have had probably, with the price of PVC pipe, because a 10-foot half inch is like, I don't know, almost $6 now. So you figure up, it takes quite a bit of PVC pipe to do that many. As you can see, this is the bottom of the ring, and what I do here is just drill a hole, and you don't want to go in too deep because you don't want your screw sticking out. So these are 1 inch. 1 inch screws go in the bottom here, and some of them stick out a little bit. Just don't try to drive it in too hard. And if it does, you can always come back with a Dremel and just round off the little tip if any of it's sticking out. But like I said, once you pull those up the bottom 1x2 up against the rings, they're pretty tight at that point. So I'm just coming along and putting one screw in at the bottom. And then eventually what I'm going to do is go around with liquid nails or silicone or anything, just to help hold them in. Probably be liquid nails, but I'll come in and do the little bead on each one, and then that will help make them secured even more. But I just thought putting the one screw in them would make a lot more secure than what they are. They'd probably fall out if you don't. I know some people use hot glue. You can use hot glue. I'll probably still use the liquid nails. And as you can see here, this goes back to the top. And I'm just drilling them down. And this long one here is at 10 inches from the top. And then the one beside it will be at 6 inches. And then you just continue the same process over and over and over. Like I said, the more and more you do, the faster you get. I'm at the point now where, like I said, I made 7 total in this bunch here. And by the time I got to by the third, when I was going pretty fast, I could knock them out in about 15, 20 minutes. Of course, everything was already cut. The PVC pipe, all the 1x2s were already cut. But, at that point, you can really start knocking them out. And I'm pressing them down here just to make sure they're flush with that spacer that I put in there. And then, like I said, I just drill from the bottom here and just drill into the rings. And like I said, those are 1-inch screws that go in the bottom. Anything longer than 1 inch will poke out the ring. Do a very good job over the camera. That was kind of in the way of the camera there, but you get the whole process. It's pretty simple. Like I said, just 10 inches from the long one, 6 inches from the short one. You just screw the one in across the top, put your rings in, then you just slide your bottom completely up against it, screw all them in, and then your rings are pretty tight. Then just put you a 1-inch screw in the bottom of the ring, and they're pretty much secure. They're not going anywhere. They can still maybe turn a little bit, swivel. You could even swivel them if you want, make them all crooked if you want. Here we're putting the finials on. I'm using the heat gun here to heat it up. And at first I have a little more problems. Now I'm a lot faster on them. I can knock them out. But you got to realize these are square. So when you go to order these, this is 1/2-inch PVC pipe. But you need to remember, when you order them, you want the 3/4 inch, not the 1/2 inch. If you order a 1/2 inch, they won't work. So you want the 3/4 inch, and those are square. So you'll have to heat this up. And what you do is form that around the circle, and then it'll form into a square. Here I'm showing you, it's completely square. So that's why you got to heat this up. And then what I use, I just seemed like it was faster because sometimes it just didn't want to work right. So what I done was took a little bitty wooden block to help push it into the square, and then it just went faster and faster after you get used to it. But as you can see here, these are some of the first ones I done, and I was having a hard time with them. But once you get them heated up and get them in there, you just take that little square wooden block and just force it in there, and it gets faster and faster. And then you just want to push it down as far as you can push it, and then it eventually form into that square after it cools down. And they're pretty tight. They will come off, and you'll see in the video they do come off. But I mean, I'm jerking on them to get them off. Here we go. I'm gonna pull on them here, but you see me pull it up. It'll come off. But when you go back on, it almost feels like they click back on, and they're pretty straight. Like I said, you can put a screw in them, you can super glue them, ever how you want to do it. And this was the whole fence being finished, and they're not painted or anything yet. I'm gonna paint them all at the same time. But it's kingsmetal.com is where I got these at. If anybody was wondering, the fentanyls. I think mine came out of Atlanta, Georgia, but it's kingmetals.com. So thanks for watching.